All right, welcome to second grade unit 2. We're going to go ahead and talk through this unit on matter. So second grade unit 2 is all about material matter and its properties. So you're doing a lot of exploration about different properties of matter, how we use those properties to design different things, and how those properties can change. So we're going to look at a couple of the activities that you're going to be doing throughout this unit. The first couple of days is just introduction to matter, and then talking about how matter is made up of small pieces. So to do that, we explore with Lego blocks and different cubes, building things, taking it apart, showing that all things are made of multiple little pieces. And so they just kind of get this idea for students that matter is made of, all objects are made of small pieces of matter. And that the matter can sometimes be rearranged and changed over time. So there's a couple different activities with building blocks, so students can explore with those. Then we move on to describing matter. So you just have a bunch of different, anything that you can find in your room. There's a list in the lesson plans, but just things that, like pipe cleaners or Twizzlers, things that can bend, things that are metal, things that are flexible, bouncy, anything that has different properties. You do a big exploration and you talk about these different properties of matter. After that, we do a bouncing ball investigation where you drop balls from different heights and see how high they bounce, and that can be a whole group investigation or a small group investigation. We then investigate with the strength of paper and talk about how different papers meet different needs. So to do that, we just hole punch a hole in a different paper. This is a paper towel, and then we add weights into the cup until it rips through and falls. Students then have great data to collect, and they can graph that data and explore why something like a paper towel, it may be not as strong as cardstock or newsprint, but it's also absorbent, so it has specific properties that we use to help us because of those properties. We then move into a sink and float activity. We do a modified version of a picture-perfect lesson called Float Your Boat. So we do the sink and float investigation. We read this book called Cap'n Kidd's Experiments with Sinking and Floating. We introduce the idea of buoyancy, that things that are buoyant float. There's also a great probe on watermelon and a floating watermelon and a sinking grape that your kids will love, including videos. I would use your materials tub. It would be a great thing to sink and float different objects in. And students are probably familiar with some things that sink and float. I try to incorporate things that may sink that they wouldn't expect to, or float, vice versa. Then we use this book, Toy Boat, to introduce students to a simple design challenge where they're going to use aluminum foil and try and build a little boat to float in the water. So that's a modified version, shorter day there. We then have a couple days to design, or there's a couple different design challenges you can pick from. One's called a hat for the weather, where students are using different materials and trying to design a hat to keep themselves dry from the rain. Or there's a roof for a doghouse, so they're trying to use different materials. And again, it's all about the properties of those materials serving a certain purpose. So, we use metal on our some roofs or asphalt shingles because they don't let the rain come through, they're durable, they serve a specific purpose. And so just getting kids to understand that materials have specific properties that we use, and that those properties are why we choose to use that material. We then introduce a new lesson in this curriculum from our Picture Perfect STEM book. It starts off with this great book called The Day the Crayons Came Home. It's part of the crayon series. I love this story. So that's a way to introduce this idea of crayon exploration. Students then measure crayons, look at how they're different, and they talk about how crayons can change. So you do things like a wax melting activity. I have a video of this you can incorporate as well, but using a hairdryer to melt the wax and show that you can change it, but it changed back to a solid, so there's a change in matter. The students explore in the books from wax to crayon how crayons are created, and both these books are available at your buildings. And then at the end, if you want to, there's an additional component where you take broken crayons and you use molds and make new crayons, recycled crayons, and that's an extension activity that you can do. So again, exploring properties of crayons, you measure, you compare crayons, they graph their favorite color. There's just a lot of good activities to do with crayons there. And then the last component of the unit is talking about freezing and melting. And so we actually go through the picture perfect lesson called Freezing and Melting. And they read this book called Wembley's Ice Cream Star, and it learns about how the star melts. And they talk about why does the thing melt. Then you can melt popsicles, and students do some popsicle soup activity. There's some liquid and solid demonstrations. And then students actually make bagged ice cream with milk and salt and ice. And so that's a fun favorite activity for students as part of this unit. And they talk about those changes, that some changes are irreversible. So like freezing and melting water is a reversible change. It can happen over and over again. And then stuff like cooking bread or cooking an egg is an irreversible change. You can't go back and forth. And so this is beginning to introduce students to chemical and physical changes through those different investigations. So there's tons of additional books, such as like What's the Matter in Mr. Whisker's Room, or Change It. So there's a lot of different texts that you can incorporate in the unit, but I know your kids will enjoy exploring properties of matter.